The massive wildfires engulfing Northern California have claimed their first lives. Authorities said a helicopter pilot flying water drops died when his aircraft went down. A utility worker helping firefighters in another area was also killed. Officials say the toll may rise.
There are people that are unaccounted for, that we are looking to try to determine where they are.
The fires have burned more than 1,400 square kilometers. Hundreds of homes and other buildings have burned, and authorities say as many as 25,000 structures are at risk. Tens of thousands of people have been evacuated, and some entire towns have emptied out. A combination of extremely high temperatures, months without rain, and gusty winds is pushing firefighters to their limits.
There's reported pictures of embers actually falling the size of like a chocolate chip cookie being basically thrown 10 miles out in front of this, causing spot fires.
Fire crews attacked the blaze from the air, trying to save homes. In Southern California, fires burned east of Los Angeles, the area's unique Joshua trees blazing in the desert wind. And where there's fire, there's smoke, visible from outer space. Pollution monitors say the San Francisco Bay Area now has the worst air quality on Earth, and people are being urged to stay inside if they can. The weather forecast offers no relief in sight, with more hot, dry, windy days to come.
California declaring a state of emergency tonight, forcing thousands to rush from their homes, some of them injured during their escape. This was the scene driving through the flames near the biggest cluster of fires in the Bay Area. The flames racing across the hills, dozens of structures gone, at least 50 families left homeless tonight. The lightning combined with searing heat, an awful combination tonight. And we have just learned this evening about a helicopter involved in this firefight that has crashed. ABC's Clayton Sandell leads us off from the fire zone tonight.
Tonight, parts of the Golden State, now a fiery explosion of red, orange, and black. Thousands ordered to evacuate in darkness.
Don't stop.
Families racing to escape flames pushed by heat and wind.
Up and down the street, there's quite a few homes and structures that are burning right now.
Near Vacaville, a city of 100,000 northeast of San Francisco, multiple fires are tearing through communities. More than 46,000 acres scorched. The traffic on fire radios painting a grim picture of injuries and a losing battle.
3 ambulance for burn injuries, 2 victims en route.
These wildfires are moving incredibly fast, turning this entire mobile home park into an apocalyptic wasteland. Many got out with just seconds to spare.
It was like the entire wall of the forest was just coming at us down the road. It was so scary.
How much time did you have when?
30 seconds. I looked up and the back of my house was on fire.
Judy Vollmer and Marcia Ritz have been neighbors for 13 years.
I know.
Both their homes are gone.
I lost my cats and everything. I have no insurance. I've lost everything.
Now, Vollmer's most valuable possession is a very special flower pot pulled from the ashes.
The grandbabies made this for me. That's their handprints.
The dozens of fires here are grouped into what firefighters call complexes. There are now 4 burning across the state, supercharged by the weather.
Over the past 72 hours, California has experienced a historic lightning siege.
And climate change. Stanford researchers say the number of extreme fire weather days in California has doubled. With so many growing blazes, planes, choppers, and firefighters are stretched thin.
We have no more to give on the front lines.
Just an incredible scene unfolding. Clayton with us live tonight, and those reports of a firefighting helicopter going down. What have you learned tonight?
Yeah, that's right, David. We understand this is a private helicopter contracted to fight a blaze near Fresno. When it crashed, it sparked a new 50-acre blaze that authorities tell us is not a threat to any homes or structures. We've also been told that the pilot, the only person on board, did not survive. David.
All right.
This morning, fear and devastation across California.
We've been through a lot of fires in this area. Nothing like this.
It was like the entire wall of the forest was just coming at us down the road.
I looked up and the back of my house was on fire.
Hundreds of wildfires ravaging the state. The Bay Area, now the hardest hit of all.
Fire coming down the hill, so we are leaving.
Thousands in the region woke up in the middle of the night to find ominous scenes.
I could see the red glow and I was hearing explosions.
You had fire up here and then just embers over here and just everything with light.
One woman saying she was only able to escape the oncoming flames because a friend called to warn her.
She told me before it came that it was coming, so that helped. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have known in time.
And near Fresno, a helicopter en route for aerial support crashed, killing the pilot and sparking yet another fire. Officials say Thursday that multiple wildfires have now burned into each other, creating massive spans of flames called complexes, including one near Santa Clara that has burned nearly 100,000 acres.
The size and complexity at which these incidents are burning is challenging all aspects of emergency response.
In Napa, more than 46,000 acres have already burned, and at least 2,000 homes are threatened, and more than 50 have already been destroyed. And near Santa Cruz, a staggering 22 fires have burned together. More than 20,000 people now evacuated amid the serious threat to safety.
3 ambulance for burn injuries, 2 victims en route.
Firefighters now urging anyone in the fire's paths to take their safety into their own hands.
Even if you think the fire is a far distance away, we don't know what's going to happen. We need everybody to take responsibility for their own evacuation.
Steve, just about 10 minutes ago, there was a big tree that was blocking Alma here near Parker, but you can see crews have done a great job in clearing all of this up. They're now sweeping away some of those tree branches there, but they've pretty much removed all debris from the road. We spoke to an officer who's working this scene, and he told us that he has received a lot of calls tonight about downed trees. The storm rolled in earlier this evening, and we're told that wind speeds were up to 60 miles per hour. Now, the storm didn't last long, but it left behind a lot of damage. Plano Emergency Management is reporting down trees, power lines, light poles. Currently, 21,000 customers are without power in the city.
It's only the start of fire season in the Amazon, but it's already the worst in a decade. Brazil's National Institute for Space Research is reporting a total of 6,300 blazes in July, 28% more than for the same period in 2019. Environment Minister Ricardo Salles says measures are being taken to prevent last year's tragedy from repeating itself.
We are sending an additional 3,000 firefighters and more aircrafts to protect the forests and prevent their destruction.
In July, the government banned fires for 120 days in the Amazon and Pantanal regions. Farmers have been forbidden from burning vegetation to clear their land during the dry season. But that hasn't stopped them. It took one farmer in the northern state of Pará half an hour to clear his land. By the time satellites and local authorities spotted the fire, it was too late.
We perform a satellite analysis, which gives us information about where these infractions are taking place. And based on that, we search the system and also identify who owns these areas.
Why are you ignoring my calls? Don't you want to let me hear your voice?
A phone call filled with playful love, still there after years of marriage. It was the last time Ibtisam Hazrouti heard her husband's voice.
When the explosion took place, he was doing his duties in the operation room at the silo, and he talked to mom just prior to the explosion.
Hassan Hazrouti worked at the grain silos of Beirut port. His family have had no news about him for over 2 weeks now.
My children want their father. I want my husband back. I can't say he's dead. He's still missing, but he disappeared for nothing. We are all destroyed. Our bodies, our souls, our houses, everything is destroyed.
The explosion was one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history. It was a mad rush to find survivors in the early days. Salim is a dive instructor and immediately volunteered to join the rescue.
You see all the buildings like skeleton, you can see through them because there is no window, no furniture, nothing. So you can look at all this angle, this semi-sphere here, so everything was destroyed.
It was chaos, he tells us.
Maybe the visibility was cannot see anything, nothing.
Over 2 weeks on and people are still missing, and it's harder to identify them now.
Look at the beginning, it was fresh bodies, recently injured and recognizable. With time passing, we had shredded bodies or people unrecognizable because of trauma. They were all admitted, put in the fridge, and identification was then started for difficult cases.
As we were finishing this report, the Hazrouti family got the terrible final news. Hassan's body had been identified. A father, a husband, they're everything. A mother who in her aging years has to bury her child. A son trying to hold it together. The family has told us they want justice, an independent international investigation into what happened and who is responsible.
Level of discontent in Lebanon. A lot of people here are blaming the government and endemic corruption for the explosion that took place.
The discontent is simply at its highest level. It's at its peak. It cannot get further than that. It cannot get more than that. I mean, what do you expect us? The cities, the capital of Lebanon has been blown apart. What kind of response are we still waiting for? The people of Lebanon, and thank you to the international viewers who are watching us today and who are providing us their help, their support, and their attention. We need help. The people of Lebanon is begging you for help. We're held hostage by this regime. We're held hostage by the people who are still in power, this corrupt class that keeps, that's just unaccountable.
Before we talk more about the situation, of course, let's take a look at those last 2 weeks. After the explosion, what happened? The world leaders coming to Beirut to show their support, and also the very difficult situation for many people here in Lebanon. Many people, 300,000 people with no homes left. Look at this report by Catherine Viet.
August 4th, twin blast rocked the port of Beirut, leveling the area and leaving a massive crater approximately 140 meters wide. The explosion shockwave blew out windows across the city and was felt as far away as Cyprus. The culprit, 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that had been unsafely stored at one of the port's warehouses. With nearly 200 dead, more than 6,000 injured, and 300,000 homeless, it's the most destructive blast in Lebanon's history. In the aftermath, rescuers combed through the rubble looking for survivors, while volunteers came together to help organize cleanup efforts. All the while, public fury mounting over the government's slow response. as Lebanese officials promised a transparent internal investigation. French President Emmanuel Macron flew to Beirut 2 days after the blast. He toured the devastated port and talked to people in the street in a visit meant to express solidarity with the Lebanese. Meanwhile, documents surfaced showing that officials knew about the dangers posed going back several years, once again igniting anti-government protests. Targets included the Foreign Ministry building and Parliament, as protesters accused their leaders of corruption and mismanagement. Several days of demonstrations brought clashes with riot police. The mounting public pressure forcing the resignation of Prime Minister Hassan Diab's government on August 10th.
Lucky Mahdi relies on tourists to Vilakazi Street in Soweto to make a living. The car park attendant still comes to work during one of the world's longest lockdowns, but business is quiet. He applied to the government's COVID relief fund for a grant of $20 a month, but says he's not received anything.
There's dancers, there's people who sell stuff. It's quiet, very quiet. And I'm also thinking about those people, with what's happening about them. They're also hungry like me.
Vilakazi Street was once home to former President Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. The area usually bustles with tourists and students on school tours. 5 months into South Africa's lockdown, it's deserted. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, up to 400 customers a day from all over the world would visit this restaurant, which specializes in traditional food. Now, its owner says he's lucky if he sees a handful of customers a day. He hopes the easing of lockdown restrictions and the resumption of alcohol sales, even if limited to certain hours, will boost business.
For us, it's been difficult because we used to sell buffet before. And for us to change from the buffet setup to be an a la carte or off-sales place, the adjustment was quite difficult and made us to lay off about 90 people to stay at home instead of the 110 we normally have.
South Africa's Revenue Service says the ban on cigarette and alcohol sales cost the economy almost $600 million in tax revenue and affected thousands of jobs. South Africa has an official unemployment rate of about 30%. The government had hoped to use the tourism industry to boost the economy and create jobs. But with tourist attractions deserted for months, more job losses are feared. The government says about 400,000 jobs in the tourist industry alone could be lost. As South Africa's borders remain closed, it's hoped domestic tourism will pick up.
We've estimated that it's going to take us about 2 years to actually recover to 2019 level, pre-COVID levels. And that's, again, going to be start to kind of how we build confidence in traveling around the world.
While many are celebrating the easing of the months of restrictions, others don't know when they'll be busy again. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, Johannesburg.
It's a vaccine that's most likely to bring an end to the pandemic, and that depends on people like John. He's in good health, but knows many others who aren't, and now wants to help test experimental vaccines so they can be rolled out as quickly as possible to those who need them the most.
Some of my friends in this age group are not being so lucky. They've got underlying health conditions. I've got grandchildren who I'm hoping will go back to school in September. That's going to increase the exposure. So I think anything I can do that will bring forward a usable vaccine is something that I really should do.
More than 100,000 people have so far signed up to the COVID-19 Vaccine Research Registry, a database of volunteers. But many more will be needed as large-scale clinical trials start this autumn to help test whether prototype vaccines can protect against the virus. Older patients and those from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds are particularly needed.
When a vaccine comes, it is very important that this is the vulnerable population we want to vaccinate. But we need to make sure that the trials produce a desirable result in this population, so that when a vaccine gets licensed eventually, we know that it will work in that population.
2 vaccine studies are currently running in the UK, one in Oxford, another in London. But at least 10 are expected to start between September and the end of the year. Signing people up to a registry now should speed up the trials. Well, that took a matter of minutes to enter some basic personal details and give a little bit of my medical history. If I meet the criteria for a study running in my area, a researcher will now get in touch. They tell me a little bit more about the clinical trial. I get to ask some questions, and only then do I consent to take part. Vaccines have never been developed at such a rapid pace, but those in charge say that doesn't mean researchers are taking shortcuts.
The MHRA, which is the regulator in the UK, has very, very high, as they should, high standards for safety. Those safety studies are not being compressed, they're not being changed. There's no difference in how new vaccines are being evaluated for this pandemic versus any other vaccine or therapeutics.
If the trials go well on volunteers like John, a vaccine could be approved by medical regulators towards the end of the year, then rolled out to frontline health and care workers and high-risk patients soon after. Thomas Morse.
A final question then. Tillman Fertitta was on last week. He has a number of major restaurants in Manhattan, and of course he's concerned about where this is all headed. But he had a broader warning for the whole country. He said this isn't just about New York City. He said the USA can't come back without New York City. Is that right?
No, it's not right. New York City used to be the center of the universe for the financial capital of the globe. Technologies enable that to be a very portable industry as opposed to what it's been in the past. And I think that New York City is going to struggle, but other cities and other states are going to prosper as a result of that. And I think you're going to see the tax-friendly states and the 7 states with no personal income tax grow significantly, and it's a much more competitive environment. New York City can come back if it becomes competitive, and if we all recognize that we've got to go and compete with South Florida, we've got to compete with Nashville, we've got to compete with Austin, Texas, and Dallas, Texas. Absent of that, if we keep these blinders on, then New York's hole is going to just dig deeper.
We have a disadvantage of globalization, closeness, connectedness, but an advantage of better technology. So we hope to finish this pandemic before less than 2 years, especially if we can pull our efforts together and with national unity, global solidarity. That's really key, with utilizing the available tools to the maximum and hoping that we can have additional tools like vaccine. I think we can finish it in a shorter time than the 1918 flu.
Worse than a horror movie, that's how the Fetushka family described their ordeal inside a detention center. The entire family was detained on August 10, the evening after protests started against a disputed presidential election. Police responded with violence and detained nearly 7,000 people across Belarus.
It was a very planned situation, and these guys who were, beating us and detaining us, they told us that they have an order and they have they can do whatever they want. So they have the highest permission to do anything.
16-year-old Miron was the first family member to be detained. He was walking with his mom when armed police grabbed him. There was no protest at the time. When Christina, a marketing analyst, and her husband Andrei, a doctor, went to a police station to look for him, they too were detained. They were taken to Okrestina, a detention center in Minsk, where many detainees have said they were tortured.
All the women were forced to completely undress, and they were filming us on their phones. Then we moved to the floor where naked men were kneeling, hands behind their backs. I could only think about my son's friend who saw her father naked in this position. When she turned her head away, she was beaten.
Christina, who is a diabetic, says she lost consciousness after being refused medication. She was kept with 34 women for 3 nights in a cell, meant to hold 4 people.
Men were screaming for their mothers. There were the sounds of electroshocks, sounds of horror, sounds of beatings, and there were women in our cell who knew their children were among them and their husbands too. It was horrifying. It was more horrible than being beaten ourselves. We were afraid that they had captured the whole city and they would kill everybody. They were shouting at us that they would do that.
While mothers outside the detention center kept shouting their children's names, Miron was released after 6 hours.
I had no illusions about police and the state in Belarus, but I just experienced and faced it myself, The worst experience was actually, looking for my parents. I didn't know where they were, and it was terrible. And I just found out that I cannot tolerate this people being in power.
After looking around the
absolutely packed out sports stadium in Abidjan was really little more than a formality. President Alassane Ouattara being sworn in as the candidate for the ruling RHDP party at the upcoming presidential elections. He will now be standing for a third term in office, something that his supporters are clearly very happy about.
Et moi je pense qu'avec Alassane Ouattara, c'est l'essentiel quoi, il n'y a pas match quoi. C'est lui seul qui peut nous envoyer plus loin.
La Côte d'Ivoire est un pays de paix, de stabilité. Nous seulement on veut voter Ado, on est là c'est pour Ado.
While his supporters may be happy, opposition figures clearly will not be. They say that Ouattara is essentially breaking the constitution by standing for a third mandate. They say the constitution limits the presidency to 2 terms.
It's a move that could herald a new era for Libya. In separate statements, President Fayez al-Sarraj, the head of the UN-recognised Tripoli government, and Aguila Saleh, the Speaker of the Eastern-based parliament allied with military strongman Khalifa Haftar, declared an immediate ceasefire throughout the country. The UN mission in Libya said the announcements demonstrated the courage which Libya was in urgent need and called on all parties to rise to the historic occasion. The two sides have been at war virtually since the formation of al-Sarraj's government of national unity in December 2015. Haftar's forces expanded their territories in the east and the south and mounted a fierce offensive to capture the capital, Tripoli. But they had to retreat in June of this year after Turkey intervened militarily to help the unity government. In July, the Parliament of Egypt, a long-time backer of Haftar's eastern forces, approved troop deployment around the last remaining battleground Sirte, raising fears of a full-blown proxy war between Cairo and Ankara. In a tweet, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi called the ceasefire an important step on the road towards achieving a political settlement and the aspirations of the Libyan people to restore stability and prosperity in their country. The two sides have also agreed to hold elections in the near future. The situation remains precarious around Sirte, a major gateway to Libya's oil facilities. While al-Sarraj has called for the creation of demilitarized zones around the coastal city, Saleh proposed the installation of a new government there.
Protests continue in the streets of Bamako, days after the overthrow of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta by the military. After calling for him to be ousted, opposition supporters are overjoyed. But the coup has been viewed less favourably outside Mali. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, are sending a delegation to the country this Saturday. Its stated aim is to ensure the immediate return of constitutional order, but it's not likely to receive a warm welcome. The military maintains President IBK resigned willingly, and the main opposition party say ECOWAS won't influence their position.
Le débat entre les chefs d'État de la CEDEAO a eu lieu. Vous connaissez déjà le résultat. Ils veulent venir, ils viendront, mais nous pas bouger.
The military junta says it's seeking a transitional president to return the country to civilian rule, but refuses to give a set time frame.
Vous savez, il est très très difficile à ce stade de dire quand est-ce que la transition va durer. L'objectif, c'est de finir la transition, d'organiser les élections générales, mais on espère que ça va être la plus brève possible.
It's not clear whether the main opposition party will be involved in this planned transition. While the M5 RFP led protests against the president, they didn't take part in his overthrow. But many of their supporters are angry at what they see as his failure to stem the jihadist insurgency, revive the economy, and tackle corruption.